Welcome to From the Quarries. Tonight's presentation is an extract from The Two-Fold Nature of Freemasonry by Kenneth H. Hooley. The copy I have is undated, but it appears to be a presentation given to the Brethren of Virginia in the United States sometime in the last couple of decades of the 20th century. This is a very profound and thought-provoking work, which asks some challenging and important questions. I hope you enjoy it. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's presentation, From the Quarries, an archive of Masonic lore. Among the craft, very little is known about the origins of Freemasonry, the designed purpose of its exoteric or outer work, and even less about the esoteric aspect of its ritualistic work. How better to begin than to open the first great light in Masonry to page 1. In the beginning, God created the above and the below, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Thus is stated two divine laws. 1, the Hermetic law, as above, so below, as within, so without. And 2, a corollary of the first law, the law of duality. The 6 days of creation is really a declaration of the evolutionary-devolutionary process which governs all of creation, including the destiny of the soul of man. Then follows the story of Adam's creation and his ouster from the Garden of Eden. Symbolically, Eden was that temporary state of suspension, of inaction, before the inbreathing of the Spirit of God upon his waters. Eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was a programmed necessity. It was a predestined event. The moment Adam partook of that sacrament, 2 things happened. 1, he became subject to 2 conflicting inner drives, the constructive and the destructive. And 2, he became subject to the law of personal responsibility for his choices, i.e., his actions. Thus did God launch man upon the long road towards his eventual destiny, eternal salvation as God's co-creator, or eternal oblivion as the price of refusal to accept this builder's responsibilities. Thus, from the beginning was created the inner and the outer, the above and the below. From the beginning, man, like Prometheus, has been bound to that necessity. Also, like Prometheus, man's only unbinding from the limits of the lower law will come through his total obedience of the higher law, wherein lies a freedom never promised by Satan and all of his ruffians. He must curb his undue passion by the horizontal plane of the level. He must erect his aspiring goals heavenward by the perfect vertical of the plumb line. Thus, the Mason may complete the work of the entered apprentice and the fellow craft by the completion of the right angle. The Master Mason degree is a representation of the finished work. It is the transformation of the right angle into the right triangle by connecting the ends of the horizontal and the vertical planes with the hypotenuse, a representation of infinity. It represents the completion of the temple not made with hands, and in that completion is found the Philosopher's Stone, or the true word of the Master Mason. Each entered apprentice must first build his horizontal level. Each fellow craft must erect his vertical pillar of goals and aspirations, set his Jacob's ladder thereupon, and climb, rung by rung of experience, until he arises to that level where he might find that special path which leads to the building of his hypotenuse. This is God's evolutionary law. There is no possibility of escape. His only option is unthinkable: to drown in the depths of eternal oblivion. Because of the foregoing, we can better understand that subjective disciplines have two aspects. Remember the law of duality. One is the objective, exoteric or outer appearances. The other is the hidden, esoteric or inner obscure meanings. Esoteric philosophy obscures the inner truth, in part by necessity and in part by deliberate purpose. Freemasonry also has an esoteric aspect and its exoteric work. The esoteric aspect is embodied by its secret signs, tokens, and ritual. The ritual is really a type of ancient mystery play. Its plot is the age-old legend of the fall of man. The legend also intimates the existence of a path by which man may re-arise to sublime heights, if he will accept the challenge and successfully run the gauntlet. This plot and the sacred law is basic to all time-tested religions. This is the common bond by which Masonic brethren may kneel about the three great lights in Masonry and offer up their supplications to deity. In this manner, fraternal harmony is established within the craft. In this fashion, acceptability of the craft is established in outer society. Let me quote from The Meaning of Masonry by W. L. Wilmshurst, an English Mason of high rank who bridged the 19th and 20th centuries. By the depth of his insight into the subjective nature of Masonry, and by his manner of expression, we may well suspect that he was also a spiritual Mason as well. This book is a must for every Master Mason who is strongly drawn towards the goal of esoteric or spiritual Masonry. From page 5. It seems taken for granted that reception into the order will automatically be accompanied by an ability to appreciate forthwith and at its full value all that one there finds. The contrary is the case, for Masonry is a veiled and cryptic expression of the difficult science of spiritual life, and the understanding of it calls for a special and informed guidance on one hand, and on the other, a genuine and earnest interest on the part of those seeking to be instructed. Not infrequently, one finds the brethren discontinuing their membership because they find that Masonry means nothing to them, and that no explanation or guidance is vouchsafed to them. Brethren, hearken to those words. Investiture of the substitute Master Mason's word is a disappointment. Future generations can never find out the right within any Masonic body. The originators of Freemasonry never vested that special knowledge within their creation. Spiritual initiates of authentic arcane secret societies were the founders of Freemasonry. It seems that they laboured at least 2 centuries, evolving operative guild masonry of the Middle Ages into what became Freemasonry as it emerged about the middle of the 17th century. These illumined men foresaw the coming of the Renaissance, its special opportunity for man and its singular deeds. They built into Freemasonry the basic idealism and moral requirement which they knew to be essential to the success of the work Freemasonry was to perform. However, they reserved exclusively to themselves the esoteric, arcane process which was and still is required to realize the goal which the true word of the Master Mason signifies. In the words of Wilmshurst, I emphasize that the method was necessarily to be not a haphazard but a scientific one. It is interesting to note that, in Europe, after the appearance of Freemasonry, many of the arcane societies required that their applicants be Masons, primitive or speculative. However, in the United States, Masonic membership has never been an admission requirement. The esoteric aspect of Freemasonry was designed to operate on two planes. The first plane is that of the collective or group function. The second plane is that of the inner being of the individual Mason. Wilmshurst emphasizes this in his meaning of Masonry. Know thyself was the injunction inscribed over the portals of ancient temples of initiation, for with that knowledge was promised the knowledge of all secrets and all mysteries. And Masonry was designed to teach knowledge much deeper, vaster, and more difficult than is popularly conceived. The wisest and most advanced of us is perhaps still but an entered apprentice at this knowledge, however high his titular rank. Here and there may be one worthy of being hailed as a fellow craft in the true sense. The full master mason, the just man made perfect, who has actually travelled the entire path, endured all its tests and ordeals, and becomes raised into conscious union with the author and giver of life, and able to mediate and impart that life to others, is at all times hard to find. Every coin has two sides. This is but another vernacular statement of the law of duality. It is universal and all-pervading. The Supreme Architect designed man to conquer his external environment and to expand it in an evolutionary fashion by use of his 5 physical senses and objective mind. But he also endowed man with a subconscious capacity to function as a bridge, which crosses the obscure boundary between the outer material world and the unseen inner spiritual world. Likewise, the originators of Freemasonry designed our fraternity to perform a double function. 1. To supply and apply the idealistic and ethical mortar for securely binding the unfolding social organizations of man on the west side of the foreseen Renaissance. And 2. To serve as the concealed connector to the illuminated spiritual initiates and their arcane societies. This last point is affirmed by Wilmshurst. Nevertheless, to point to that path of self-perfecting to those who care and dare to follow it, modern speculative masonry was instituted.